And I call the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on this bill. As with all omnibus bills, there are good and bad elements. And with contentious policy areas such as industrial relations, there is often a polarisation of views depending on which side of the ideological fence you are on. For example, with respect to this bill, the Labor Party and the unions would have you believe that the world will end if the bill proceeds. The Liberal Party, on the other hand, would have you believe that the world will end if it doesn't proceed. Having looked at the bill and listened to representatives from the ACTU, individual unions, local businesses and industry bodies, there appears to be elements that have merit and some that I believe must be addressed and/or rejected outright. One element of merit is the introduction of a definition for the term casual employee. Currently, the Fair Work Act does not determine the term. Instead, the meaning is applied from common law. Until recent court decisions, casual employees, among other criteria, were loosely defined as employees who were engaged as casuals without expectations of ongoing work and without fixed hours of employment. The Skeen and Rosato cases have now created uncertainty for employers, as employees engaged as casuals may now be deemed as other than casuals, and at some point in time become entitled to the payment of annual and other leave entitlements, even though they have received casual loading. And this has left the industry with the potential of $39 billion in exposure. Unions have raised concerns that the introduction of a definition of casual employment will deny employees their right to recover entitlements if, during their employment period, the employee was not casual. I don't believe this to be technically true. The bill in this instance takes a common sense approach, I believe, requiring employees to be entitled to receive in total an amount not less than the casual loading amount. This set-off provision ensures employees receive their legal entitlement and protects employers from paying entitlements twice. Now, naturally, in the Senate, should this bill proceed, there may be amendments with respect to how we create a casual employment, but I think that both employees and employers deserve to have clarity in their roles and responsibilities. In relation to the compliance and enforcement provisions, increasing the cap from $20,000 to $50,000 for small claims wage recovery is an important step, and I think it's admirable in assisting employees recover their hard-earned wages in instances where employers have not paid them appropriately. Similarly, the introduction of a criminal offence for wage theft and increasing maximum civil penalties for underpayment contraventions will send the right signal to the small minority of employers that do the wrong thing. Now, the part-time flexibility amendments may seem sensible while they reflect the conditions contained in many union negotiated enterprise agreements. I can understand that some unions are worried that this has the potential to expect too much flexibility from their employees that could have 16 hours one week, 32 hours the next, but of course when they go and get a bank loan, it's only ever 16 hours that's recognised. As I mentioned, there are union negotiated enterprise agreements, especially in the retail sector, that provide for part-time employees that work additional hours without range. Without a range, as in some agreements, this section simply encourages, I believe, employers to treat part-time workers like a casual worker without the casual work loading. Now, the government says, well, the employee can choose not to accept, but I don't think that that really recognises the power imbalance between workers and employers. The government's defence that any additional hours must be by agreement, I just don't believe is correct. And while I believe this provision potentially has a sensible intent, it does not provide appropriate protection for workers and may likely result in a newer form of lower flexible worker. And I cannot support this provision in its current form. And we need to recognise in this place that this bill will affect the lowest paid workers in Australia more than anyone else. During my discussions with unions and industry, the most contentious elements of the bill resoundingly centres around the Better Off Overall test changes. Now, I'm pleased the government has abandoned these changes, but I'm deeply concerned that they were there in the first place. And while the government seeks to reform and to address obvious areas of deficiency, such as the definition of casuals and wage theft, the bill as a whole does not satisfy the fairness test nor satisfactorily address the areas of deficiency. And given the many elements of the bill that I believe are fair and reasonable, I think that the government should pull apart this bill in this chamber, and if the government is not willing to approach the bill in this way, I simply cannot support it, and I will need to leave it to the Senate to hopefully ensure that those provisions and the protection of workers continues, particularly around areas around wage theft. But the best thing the government could do, I think, is go back to the table, pause this bill, go back to the table, sit down with unions, sit down with employer groups, and actually let's get a bill that does the right thing by workers and by small businesses. Thank you.